Work from homers. Naresh and I are trying out a new app called Wisdom and want our listeners to come hang out with us for half an hour. We'll be doing our session with listeners on Wednesday, December 22nd at 5 p.m. Eastern. Our breakout room will be called Work From Home Show. If you can't find us with that, look for something very similar. If you want to join us, download the Wisdom app on the Apple Store completely free, and we will see you on Wednesday, December 22nd.
Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh Vissa with Adam Schrader. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. Today we have Eoin Colfer. He's the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Artemis Fowl, Benny Shaw, Fowl Twins, and the Half Moon Investigations series. I'm sure many of you have either heard of the books or read the books. I'll tell you, Artemis Fowl. Unfortunately, I never got around to it, but I have many friends who are big time fans of that series. He's also the New York Times best-selling author of the 6th installment to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, as well as Iron Man, the Gauntlet, and the Supernaturalist. So without further ado, Eoin Colfer, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thank you. It's always nice to hear my resume read out. It does make me feel really old, though. It's like I've been working on this stuff for years, but it's been a while.
Well, you said you've been working on this stuff for years, and that makes you feel old. So let's take a blast from the past and talk about how you went from primary school teacher, because that's how you got started, how you went from that to New York Times bestselling, I guess I wouldn't even say children's fiction author, because I know many adults who read your books. So just New York Times bestselling fiction author.
It happened in the end. It happened really quickly, but for years, like many writers, I had to take a day job or a real job just to allow myself to keep writing. And I had written some plays, some articles for newspapers, some short stories, and even 4 or 5 books in my spare time. And you'll find there's a lot of writers who were teachers, because one of the nice things is you have a couple of months free in the summer, and you can either sun yourself on a beach, or, as we don't get much sun here in Ireland, you can find something else to do. And so I wrote books, and it turned out every summer I would get most of a book written, and then I would try and get it published in the autumn. And after 4 or 5 books, I wrote Artemis Fowl. And once I wrote that, I seemed to have found the zeitgeist and found the formula. And I got an agent very quickly, and within 3 or 4 months, it had been sold all over the world. So in the end, after 12 years of trying, it all happened in about in a matter of weeks, and I was able to take a career break from teaching, and I've never gone back, really, and that was over 20 years ago.
I want to talk about that transition from the first 5 books to Artemis Fowl. So those first 5 books, were they published? How were they published? Did they sell at all? And then when you wrote Artemis Fowl, how were you all of a sudden, I guess, proverbially overnight, you said it took a few weeks, but overnight, how did you become this big sensation?
The first 5 books that I wrote, they were published, and they did really well in Ireland. But when you're doing really well in Ireland, financially, it's not really viable. There's only, in the entire country, we only have just under 4 million people. So the amount of books you sell to be #1 in Ireland might be 1,000 books. So it just, you can't survive on that. And I think the difference was when I wrote Artemis, my wife, Jackie, had seen a program on TV talking about agents. And I never really wanted an agent because I felt I had a publishing deal. I was very happy. But she said, you need to get an agent or you won't be able to continue writing. We wanted to have a family. I didn't really have the time to have an extra full-time job, 2 full-time jobs. So I found an agent and I sent her Artemis, and she took it on. And her name is Sophie Hicks, and she really changed my life in that she didn't mess about. She went straight to Disney and said, look, I've got this guy, he's great, and I think it would really fit with you. So Disney took me, and once Disney took it on, then really it was very easy to sell it around the world, or not very easy, but it happened quite quickly. But so for me, the trick was the agent, because she knew exactly where to send the book. And also, as soon as she sent it to Disney, just the manuscript, they bought the movie rights. And so that one deal with the book and the movie rights kind of set me up for the rest of my life, really, as regards to having a solid income. So that was a very, very important day for me, and a very important phone call that my agent made. And I'm still feeling the repercussions of that today.
Now, I saw that when I was reading about you, that you cultivated a love for writing back when you were, really young. And there's a lot of people nowadays, especially as you're writing fiction. I mean, I'm homeschooling my kids, and it can be, they'll tell me stories all day long that are kind of ridiculous, but whatever. And but the act of getting them sitting down and actually writing the stories is a totally different experience. And then you have adults who haven't written in decades in a lot of cases, and probably think that their creativity is dead because they're just working their job, and their job is not, in the fiction world. But kind of what do you have to say to people? Any advice you have for just kind of getting out of the rut? I mean, you were a teacher. You could have easily just been like, I'm exhausted. I don't want to sit down and write. I don't want to create a world. Do you have any advice for people who are kind of stuck in that rut and just need to get out and start, creating?
There's so many stories of people who don't pick up a pen, figuratively, until they're in their 50s, 60s, even 70s. And so it's never, ever too late. And conversely, it's also never too early. And even if your kids are writing stories with crayons, it's never too early to start developing your style. But I can understand why, if you've been working on a job for 30 years and you feel, well, I've missed that boat. You really haven't. And if you go just Google it, there are so many examples of writers who achieve success late in life. I have friends who send me their manuscripts all the time. And the main reason that they don't succeed is because they stop. They do one book and then they stop. And that's really not how it works. Usually your first attempt, or maybe even 2 or 3 attempts at a book, you're just honing the craft. So you've got to push through that. It's like if you're going to the gym, you're not going to see those muscles in maybe in the first 6 months. So you just have to keep going and trust the process. And writing is as much a process as anything else. As to, if your kids don't pick up the pencil or the pen, that's a really tough challenge, because it's almost impossible to make someone write who doesn't want to write. If they don't, no one ever had to tell me to write something. I just had to do it. It was almost like a compulsion. So usually all you can do is make literature available and make it known at home how much you value stories and how much you value fiction or nonfiction, if that's the way your child wants to go. But that's what my parents would have done. They just always let me know that they really valued what I was doing. I was trying to write stories. They thought it was fantastic, as much as they would have if I was a football player, as much as they would have applauded my efforts if I wanted to play guitar. Sometimes writing is left out of that particular bracket, where people will, if your son or daughter is in the football team or in the volleyball team, they're given all the plaudits in the world. But if your son is writing stories in his spare time, that's not really looked on as praiseworthy. And I would encourage parents just to make it known to their kids how valuable you consider the imagination and creativity, and put the same effort into that as you would into if your son was a tennis star or if your daughter was playing lacrosse.
Yeah, I completely agree. It doesn't matter what the activity is. I want to talk, or I just want to state really quickly, Artemis Fowl was named the public's favorite Puffern modern classic of all time. It has sold more than 25 million copies and been translated into 40 different languages with multiple books and spin-offs, including a feature film. So we're not just talking about some random book that sold well here. This is one of the greatest fiction, or one of the best-selling fiction books of all time. That is really, really an accomplishment. I want to talk a little bit about your Fowl Twins series and also about your general writing and future. Do you ever worry that you're going to run out of ideas or escapades for your characters since you write series?
I do. I worry that all the time. And even more, I worry that the ideas I do have are not any good. So that self-doubt doesn't go away. Well, it certainly doesn't for me. And I think in a way it's a weapon that I have. It's a valuable weapon because it makes me want to write better stuff and to make every book I write the best book. And if I think that I don't have a good idea for a series, I will step away from that series. And that really was the idea. I finished up the Artemis Fowl because I thought this is a natural end. This is a solid story. And if I go again, I'm really just dragging it out for the sake of, the dollar. And I'm lucky that I could do that because most writers can't make that kind of decision if they want to keep writing. Whereas I was fortunate and blessed that I had sold the 25 million copies, so I could bring a certain amount of my readers to another series or another book. So I didn't have to fear too much the repercussions. But what I did fear is that I would write a book that was not interesting to me, and therefore certainly wouldn't be interesting to my readers. And I think that was the right decision to make. I feel certain if I'd kept writing Artemis Fowl, I'd be making a lot more money, but I don't think I would be as happy at work as I am now. And as most people understand that, because we're all working from home, you kind of have to be happy at home. If you're at home on your own all year round, you have to make that environment as positive as possible. And the way I've always done that is to try and work on original ideas.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that. You're doing your book tour now, and it's fair to say that it's different from your previous ones, I would assume.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how the new book tour is compared to the old, and kind of, do you like it? Do you dislike it? Kind of what are your thoughts on kind of the new way that you have to promote books because of, the current world pandemic thing?
There are positives and negatives, and I think the negatives far outweigh the positives in that you don't have that personal interaction with your readers and their parents and grandparents that I'm used to having. So if I go to a store or a bookstore in any city in the States, I would meet people that I've met 10 or 11 times before, because people tend to come back every year if they stick with the series. And it's almost an annual thing now. If I'm going to California or Chicago or New York or wherever it is, it's familiar faces. And one of the most beautiful things is if you've been meeting a child for 10 years and now he's 25 and he's married and he's bringing along his own toddler. I mean, that's a fantastic thing. And it really touches me to be involved in the growth of a family like that in some peripheral way. So I really do miss out on that. And also, as I grow older, I'm getting further and further from the mindset of a 12-year-old. So my yearly trips to meet all these 12-year-olds was recharging my batteries and giving me a lot more inspiration. And my own kids now are at 18 and 24, so they are removed from that. And even if they weren't, they wouldn't be inclined to talk about it with their dad. So I really miss that interaction and that inspiration that I got from the face-to-face with the crowds of people in schools and in bookstores and libraries across the world, really.
As I brought up earlier, you write children's books, young adult fantasy. Do you prefer writing one over the other, and how challenging is it to be good at catering towards so many different age groups?
It is challenging, but I think every book is challenging and has its own challenges. I don't know if I prefer one. Whenever I'm writing, that's my preferred mode at that moment. So when a story comes to me and I think it's a good story and I decide I'm going to write it, that's what I want to do at that time. But I just find my brain hops around and goes from genre to genre and age bracket to age bracket. And whenever I find interesting, and that's what I go for. And sometimes that's an adult book, and sometimes it's a kid's book. But what's very liberating when you're doing an adult book is you don't have to police yourself. You don't have to think, is this suitable? Is this acceptable? Is it frightening? Is it too frightening? Is the vocabulary too hard? With the adult book, if you find it interesting, it goes in. And that can be really liberating. And so I would say I find it slightly easier to write the adult books. Now, maybe some of my readers would say, yeah, it's very obvious because, your adult books are very childlike. And that, I think, is a fair comment. I like that kind of humor. I think there's a place for it, though. I mean, there's a place for every kind of book so long as it's well written and tackles challenges in an original way. But at the moment, I'm writing another kids book, so I'm really in that zone right now. But I think I'll probably follow it with an adult book, so we'll see where that will take me.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of turning your Artemis Fowl books into an actual movie that was put out there? What were you involved in that process? Like, how much creative license did you have for the script, and kind of were you happy with what came out? And also, I mean, it came out at an unfortunate time. It came out during COVID. So can you talk a little bit about that process?
Well, I wasn't actually involved very much in that process, other than I visited the set a few times and I got to meet and get to know a lot of the actors and designers and extras. So it did become quite a personal experience. But as regards the script, that I didn't have anything to do with that. So I had mixed feelings about what came out. I thought they veered a bit far from the story, and they made some sacrifices that I felt didn't make sense in a narrative setting. But the cast I really loved. I thought they were really great, especially the young kids who played Artemis and Holly were the two leads, two Irish young people who I think Laura McDonald and Ferdy Shaw, and I think they will both have big careers if they want them, if they decide they're going to stay in acting. So in that respect, I really liked it. But I think every author probably thinks they should have stuck closer to the book. So I'm told that's a common complaint among authors when they've had their books made into movies. But I was delighted it was made. I'm delighted that it's still on Disney Plus. It did really well for them, and it really helped book sales. So it kind of brought the books back into the discourse, I suppose, and it gave my career a new lease of life. So yeah, overall, I'm very happy.
You've also written installments in like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You did Iron Man, the Gauntlet. Can you talk a little bit about your joining those? It's not something you created. Can you talk about writing and kind of including your work in a series that other people have also written in?
Those things are never planned, or they're certainly not planned for me, and they're not things I go after or apply to do. It's usually a publisher or an agent or an estate that comes to me. And in the case of The Hitchhiker, it was Douglas Adams' widow and his daughter. They came to me and said that they'd like someone to do a new book, an official book for the 30th anniversary. And because Douglas was such a big hero of mine, and I really, really would consider him my biggest influence, I was very reluctant to do that. But once it had been proposed, I had an idea, and I said, okay, you know what, I'll give it a go. So, and once I had done that, it seemed like that was the most scary thing I could ever have done. So when Iron Man came up, I just thought, well, that's going to be a laugh. I'm going to really enjoy that, because so many people had done an Iron Man story that it seemed it wouldn't be as much of a challenge. So I had so much fun doing Iron Man. It was so much fun. And what I really liked about it was everybody in the world knows who Tony Stark is. So I'm just able to go out of the gate adventure, and I don't have to do any backstory really. And I don't have to, I can just let go. It's like getting on a roller coaster. So that I would say that was the most fun I ever had writing a book, was that Iron Man book. I'm not sure if I would do any more because I don't want to be known as the, the guy who contributes to series. But if something really good came up, if a Batman came up or a James Bond, I would definitely have to think about it.
That's Eoin Colfer. He is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of multiple books. Check them all out on Amazon. Also, his website, owencolfer.com. Let me spell that out. It's Eoin. Yes, Eoin, Owen. And the last name is Colfer, Colfer. So that's EoinColfer. OwenColfer.com. Owen, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners or anything else you want to promote?
Well, I'd just like to say to all the Fowl fans over there to thank them for sticking with me through this pandemic, and hopefully that I'll see them all again in the old familiar places in 2022.
Completely agree. Thank you so much, Owen, for joining us on the show. To all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. You can see all of our previous episodes there. Like us on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, subscribe there, whatever podcasting platform you use. Leave us a review there as well. Follow us on social media. If you have any questions, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com for any of your comments or questions. And until next week, keep on working from home.
Hey, Work From Homers, Adam Schrader here. We love bringing you this podcast, and thousands of you have proven that it's been helpful for you. But since time and online storage space aren't free, Naresh and I wanted to come to you personally to ask for your financial support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workfromhomeshow and help support the show. And we appreciate your support at any amount you choose. That's patreon.com/workfromhomeshow.